Hell, the word alone is enough to make hearts tighten. It's one of humanity's oldest fears: eternal fire, punishment without end, the price of sin. But here's the thing. The Bible didn't originally describe hell the way we know it today. The fiery pits, the devils with pitchforks, the eternal torture, all of that came later. Built layer by centuries of interpretation, fear, and control.
To understand how hell was created, we have to go back, long before the church, before Christianity, before even written scripture. In ancient Mesopotamia, the afterlife wasn't about punishment. The dead went to a shadowy realm called the House of Dust. A gloomy place, yes, but not a furnace of eternal pain. It was simply where all souls went, righteous or wicked. The same was true in early Hebrew thought. In the Old Testament, the dead descended to Sheol, a place of silence and darkness, not fire. There was no Satan ruling it, no judgment, no torment, just absence. So where did the fire come from? The answer lies in cultural exchange and fear. When the Jews came into contact with the Persians during their exile in Babylon, they were introduced to Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest dualistic religions. Zoroastrianism taught of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, and of a final judgment where souls would be separated, the righteous into paradise, the wicked into a lake of molten metal. That image, molten punishment, eternal fire, burned its way into Jewish and later Christian imagination. By the time of Jesus, these ideas had already fused with Greco-Roman beliefs. The Greeks had Tartarus, a deep abyss beneath Hades where the wicked were punished. The Romans carried it into their mythology too. When the early writers of the New Testament used the word Gehenna, they were referring to a real valley outside Jerusalem, the Valley of Hinnom, a place where trash and corpses were burned. Over time, that valley became a symbol of divine judgment, the fire that never goes out. But here's where the transformation began. Jesus himself spoke of Gehenna, not as a literal torture chamber, but as a symbol of spiritual decay. He warned of separation from God, of the destruction of the soul, not eternal torment. But after his death, as Christianity began spreading through the Roman Empire, new converts brought their old myths with them. The simple Hebrew ideas of Sheol merged with Greek notions of Hades, Zoroastrian punishment, and apocalyptic imagery from the Book of Revelation. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, hell had evolved into something far darker and far more useful. The early church realized something: fear is powerful. To govern souls, it isn't enough to promise heaven. You must also threaten hell. And so the church fathers, men like Tertullian, Augustine, and later Thomas Aquinas, began to define hell in vivid detail. Tertullian, writing in the 2nd century, described the eternal fire as the chief joy of the saved, watching the damned burn while basking in paradise. Augustine argued that hell's torments were endless because divine justice demanded it, and Aquinas, the great medieval theologian, justified eternal punishment as a manifestation of God's perfect order. These men were not inventing myth out of thin air. They were building theology, logical, precise, terrifying. Over centuries, their words hardened into doctrine. When Christianity became the religion of Rome, hell became the empire's invisible prison. It policed behavior better than any army ever could. By the Middle Ages, the image of hell was everywhere. Churches carved it into stone portals, so every peasant entering to pray saw demons devouring souls. Paintings like Hieronymus Bosch's The Last Judgment turned it into grotesque, surreal horror. Priests preached it in every sermon, not metaphorically, but literally. The church needed the people to believe that disobedience was not just a sin, but a sentence. The concept of purgatory emerged during this time, a sort of middle ground between heaven and hell, a place of cleansing. It was both a theological invention and a social tool. You could pay, through indulgences and prayers, to shorten your suffering or that of a loved one. It became an economy of salvation, one that funded cathedrals and filled coffers. The fear of hell had turned into currency. And the more power the church accumulated, the deeper hell grew in imagination. Dante Alighieri's Inferno in the 14th century painted it in excruciating detail. 9 circles, each more horrific than the last. His poem wasn't scripture, but it shaped the Western idea of hell more than the Bible ever did. Artists, poets, and priests borrowed his imagery, and soon hell was no longer a symbol. It was a geography, mapped, described, eternal. But beneath all this theology and art, the original message faded, that hell was once just a word for separation, loss, and decay, not torture. The church's hell was built brick by brick over centuries, a fusion of myth, fear, and control. It offered structure in a chaotic world. It gave meaning to suffering. It justified obedience. Because what better way to rule the soul than to convince it that rebellion burns forever? In time, even as the Enlightenment dawned and reason challenged faith, the image of hell refused to die. It evolved again from religious dogma into cultural instinct. Today, you don't have to believe in God to feel hell. It's in the human imagination, a place of guilt, regret, isolation, despair. The theological fire became psychological. Modern Christianity has softened it, reinterpreted it, even denied it. But the shadow remains. The word hell still carries weight because it was never just about punishment. It was about control, morality, and meaning. It's the story of how institutions turned fear into faith. The church may not have invented the afterlife, but it gave hell a face, a name, a purpose. It transformed abstract justice into eternal suffering, and in doing so it shaped the moral consciousness of the Western world. Every time someone imagines a fire waiting for them after death, they are seeing the echo of a man-made vision, born not in heaven, but in history.